Hi everyone, it's Will here, founder of Tend. So on this week's podcast, we're talking to one of our customers, Dawn, and it's quite an interesting subject. It's something that I know very little about, so I was really excited to have Dawn on so we can talk a bit more about it and help raise awareness for the condition. So we're going to be talking about pulsatile tinnitus today. So I'd like to introduce Dawn here. So Dawn, thanks very much for coming on. And I think first and foremost, could you just talk a bit about sort of what is pulsatile tinnitus? Because I say it's something I've not been aware of, even though my dad suffers from tinnitus. So yeah, if you could give us a bit of an intro on what it is.
Okay, when I was first diagnosed was the end of 2019, and it was just getting to the end of that summer. It was just when I went to bed, I was just getting these noises in my ear, thinking it was maybe I needed my ears cleaned from wax, or it was just like a kind of whooshing sound in both ears. And I finally got an appointment. I had to go privately. The doctors didn't really know anything about it. I hadn't heard of pulsatile tinnitus till I was diagnosed, and I just had a test done. And when I explained everything, and he did some testing like you do with when you're getting your ears tested for sound, for if you're going deaf, I suppose. And this is what he came up with. And there wasn't really a lot of information about. And then lockdown hit. I finished up getting in touch with a clinic in London, the Pulsatile Tinnitus Clinic. The one in Scotland had been closed during lockdown, and I did have a few Zoom calls with them there, and they explained it a little bit more. And just staying calm and relaxed. I've done a lot of mindfulness and meditation, and that was really all that was mentioned then. And obviously with lockdown, it kind of got worse due to not knowing what was going on. Really, the start of it was quite scary.
Yeah, I can imagine that. It must have been, not really knowing what it is and then not having that, being able to go and see someone. One of the many negative points of lockdown. But going back to, so how to your sort of, when you're explaining it to just sort of your average man on the street, how does it differ from regular tinnitus?
It's constant. It's with the pulse, and it's like a whooshing sound that just matches your pulse, basically. And it's constant in both ears, and it's 24/7.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So is it almost like, what they say, you can hear the sound of the sea in a shell? Is it almost like that kind of thing? Having that, yeah, imagine having a couple of shells strapped to your ears and that going on all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Through the day, with I always have to have the TV on or some music playing, and 100%. Most of the time, I can cope with it during the day. It's when you go to bed when it's quiet. I do have to listen to soundscapes through the night, or if I you wake up a few times and it's hard to get back to sleep. So it's a calm app I use actually. And there's sleep stories and things to listen to, but nighttime is pretty bad.
And sleep is so important to your life and your everyday thing. So you mentioned sleep. Has it affected your daily life in any other ways? Any other negative impacts that you've seen?
If there's noise about or talking to people like that, that's generally fine. I do a lot of walking, and I like to walk, but the pounding sometimes makes it, well, it's just with your pulse and your heartbeat and everything's getting a little bit faster if you're walking. The same happens with the tinnitus, because it's just that the constant pounding gets slightly faster. So that can be, pretty bad.
Yeah, again, all these sort of critical things that are important for a nice, healthy lifestyle, sleep and walking. If those are challenging, that must be really tough. And you've spoken a bit about sleep and quietness and a little bit around walking. Are there any other triggers that can cause it or exacerbate it or make it any worse?
stress, and just if it's, so I do tend to change my life slightly. I'm kind of retired. We have our own business, and that's a little bit quieter now for me. We've restored an old building, so all the things that I'm doing now is things that I really enjoy. So that helps to keep me a little bit calmer, and it's not too stressful, which definitely makes a difference.
And when you're talking and sort of explaining this to other people, how do you explain it to people, and explain what you're feeling and how it's affecting you?
It doesn't actually come up that often. I mean, initially I told friends, and then I just tried to keep it, yes, just don't talk about it, just try and get on with life, as what the doctors just kept saying, to be honest with you, which wasn't initially helpful, because it was, with it being during lockdown, it was really worrying and hard to cope with, and family life was quite difficult at that time. But I have got on better with it. But again, it's the worst thing is sleep. Yeah, just waking up 2 or 3 times a night and trying to get back to sleep is quite difficult.
There's nothing worse. And then also I can imagine, because my wife struggled a bit with sleep, for her as well, it then becomes a vicious circle, because the thought is there that you're going to wake up. So then you almost dread going to bed and dread going to sleep. You think, oh God, I'm going to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm not going to be able to go back to sleep.
And that's where the mindfulness and meditation comes in, because it just helps you to be more relaxed within yourself, and to stop just to try and stop thinking about it. I mean, there's time that it's gone, but, and then obviously playing, well, there's soundscapes as well that you can listen to. Just keep them very low, they've said, just along with the sound, just so that that's all you're hearing. It's just trying to match in with the tinnitus, to be honest, but it's a sound or a story that I'm listening to.
Yeah. And then, and so apart from like the sort of mindfulness, are there any other treatments that you've tried? Like, is there anything else that's been suggested to you, either by doctors or by fellow sufferers?
No.
Yeah. And is there quite a good, like, sort of community around pulsatile tinnitus? Like, are there any sort of community groups where you can kind of share your experiences and people can kind of share things that maybe have worked for them?
There is, I believe. I haven't actually joined any of that yet. It's something that I might well do. It's just I haven't as yet. Yes.
Yeah.
So we've now got our 6th grandchild on the way, so that kind of keeps us very busy. So it's prioritising where my time's spent, and that's quite joyful, actually. So that's that's where a lot of the time goes just now.
Oh, good. And then, so I know one of our professionals, Barbara, is someone who you've been working with. And so how did you kind of hear about Tend? Was it through Barbara?
Barbara. Yeah, it was through Barbara. And when she had mentioned it, and then I was having a treatment and she used it, and I actually ordered on the day, because I thought it was quite amazing, to be honest. I do have problems. I've got a little bit of arthritis in my knee and my elbow, and I had an operation on my shoulder 15 years ago, and I'd been fine up until last summer and started to get some more pain, and that's why I'd gone to see Barbara again, and she used the Tend, and it was great. And it also, with the tinnitus, it's another form of relaxation, because I found that beneficial on the shoulder and on the neck at the back. I'm not sure if Barbara mentioned, but I did get headaches after a while just through trying it on different areas, which I stopped. Yeah, that I stopped using it, because also you've got to find out if that's definitely what's causing the headaches. And I do feel that that's what it was. And it was further up the skull and on the bone behind my ear had been recommended to try it on there. So that, yeah, I just stopped using it there, and it's just predominantly on my shoulder and the back of my neck, which I feel, and the relaxation side of it is very helpful for tinnitus. If it just calms it and slows it down.
Yeah, I see. So it's almost like the use of Tend is something that just sort of takes your mind off it and just de-stresses the body, and then that then has the impact on the pulsatile tinnitus. But it's great to hear that it's been helpful, and I love all these stories when you hear people using Tend for ways that we never imagined, and it being quite beneficial. Have you ever done any kind of research into or heard about Meniere's disease?
Yes.
Because I'm just it because my business partner and my fellow founder in Tend, Rob, he suffered quite badly from Meniere's disease, and ultimately he found a lot of it was stress related. So is there any relationship between Meniere's and pulsatile, do you feel?
There can be, that I've been told, but I don't know too much about it. Once I had an MRI scan, I had a CT scan, then an MRI scan, because it's to do with the blood vessels and things, that they want to check that everything's flowing properly. And everything was fine in that regard. And I didn't really look too much into Meniere's then. As they said, it was just the pulsatile, the pulse, that's what it is. So if you run or if you're rushing about, and it just gets faster as your pulse does when you're doing anything. So that's staying calm is helpful.
Yeah. And have you ever considered or looked at like diet or anything like that? Again,
Yes.
The only reason I ask is because this is just a sort of similar scenario that my business partner went through, and he found that one of the biggest impacts was like reducing his salt and his caffeine, and that was the sort of biggest thing that helped him. So, is there anything that you've looked at for that?
Well, for years, I'm a pretty healthy eater, and no processed food. Cook all our own meals. Haven't had processed food for probably 20 years. I'll maybe have the odd bacon sandwich, but that is very, very rare.
Yeah.
And I buy from the farmers market, which I've done for nearly 30 years. So I know where most of my food comes from, basically, which I think is beneficial, because it's so scary what's being allowed to be sold in the supermarkets. It's awful. And that's got to have some impact on so many, especially with children, what they're eating from an earlier age than what we ever did. So I do think, yes, what you eat has a huge effect on how you are. But regarding pulsatile tinnitus, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is for me, it's fascinating. It seems to be more and more people are connecting different kind of conditions or problems that people have with their health that comes down to, as you say, eating processed foods. You just pick up some of the things in the supermarket and you don't recognize half the things that are in it. And it has such an effect. I mean, it's been quite interesting for us as a household, because my wife was recently diagnosed with celiac. So we've made the choice to sort of cut out gluten in our house. And just doing a bit of research on that is fascinating. And it was actually in the River. Have you ever heard of the River Cafe? It's like they do lots of cookbooks, and they've got a restaurant in London. Anyway, they did a sort of gluten-free cookbook, and the foreword was explaining why so many people have challenges with gluten, both in terms of autoimmune, but also in terms of sensitivities. And it's because wheat has been so over-engineered in the last 50 years that it's now an impossible protein for the body to break down. So you go back 50 years and wheat was a fairly, simple crop. And the body could break it down. Now it's been over-engineered to make sure that it's disease resistant, weather resistant, all these different resistances. But then the body just gets this protein in it. It's like, I can't deal with it. Like, it's too complex. And so it's just been fascinating learning about all these different sides of diet and how it can affect the body. So I agree wholeheartedly with you on that. And that's why, and also in my business partner's experience, why I'm quite interested in how diets can affect different health conditions. But we have gone very off topic, and so just sort of pulling it back to the original. I mean, it's really fascinating to talk about pulling it back to the original topic. So if I'm hoping that this will be helpful for some people that are starting out on their journey. So what advice would you give to anyone who sort of is experiencing these symptoms of pulsatile tinnitus, and what advice you would do for someone that's just sort of starting to notice these symptoms?
What I would say was, if their life's quite hectic, I think that's something that definitely has to change, because that just it has such a big input on how your life has such a big input on how the pulsatile tinnitus affects you. And it's I mean, over lockdown, that's one time I phoned the clinic in London. I felt like my head was going to explode. I mean, it was awful initially, on top of, and I think because we just hit lockdown. My youngest daughter, who was in her 20s at the time, had not long been diagnosed with MS. So that was also a huge thing on my mind during lockdown, which made it worse, because I was really, really worried about her catching it. She lived in Amsterdam at the time, but came back to Edinburgh to stay with us. She just had a baby. So yeah, that was huge, and that was probably the worst time that I had the first couple of years, which would be bad anyway, but because of lockdown, it was awful. So after that, that's when I knew I just had to, staying calm and your life not being too hectic. And yeah, it's definitely something that helps hugely.
Yeah, so that's good. That's fab. And then you mentioned a couple of apps that you use when you're going to sleep.
Yeah.
Do you mind just sharing the names of those again, just so for people that are looking for help?
The Calm app, and there's so much on it that you can use. I don't know if you've heard of Jay Shetty. He used to be a monk.
Yeah.
It says that he does a meditation. I listen to it every morning. It's just a quick one. There's lots of different ones you can listen to through him. Different variations, and it just kind of sets you up for the day. It sets me up for the day, just listening to that. And yeah, 7 or 8 minutes in the mornings, and that's really helpful. And there's music on it. There's sleep stories, lots of different meditations. Yeah, I find it really beneficial. I use it quite a lot.
That's fascinating and really good, and super helpful for anyone. I'm definitely going to pass that on to my wife when she's having trouble with her sleeping. And then the other one that's just popped into my mind, and I don't know enough about it, but I've been seeing a lot of people talking about the vagus nerve, and that's the relationship of that to kind of relaxation and stress. Is that anything that you've
brain and the stomach?
Yeah.
Because initially, when I started going off the subject again with the food and cutting out processed food and all that, I've had a lot of problems with my stomach over the years. And God, I don't know. Sorry, I've went off track there and don't know why. But that was when I first got into finding out about food. There's just different stories, and then one thing leads you to another. But that's where I first heard about the vagus nerve. That's what it was, because I know it's related to your gut. It is, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, I don't know too much about it, but just I've had, again, it's something that I've heard about, and I know a lot of people use it for mindfulness. So they use actually almost you would be able to use Tend actually, but there are certain products which it's almost like a vibrating pebble that sits on your sternum. Sort of, you can't
Right.
quite see on the screen, but it just sits there, and that helps stimulate the vagus nerve, I believe. Again, I'm going to caveat this because I haven't looked too much into it, but it was something I thought I'd ask you about because it had popped up in my in the back of my mind. This that's something that people use for mindfulness and helping relax. So
Well, that's interesting. I'll look into that.
no,
Yeah.
because it's how, but it is. I do find this fascinating how we're learning so much now about how the gut is the sort of center of everything.
Yeah.
And again, it comes a lot from our experience with my wife being celiac. She just was always like just not, under the weather, feeling rubbish, not quite right. And as soon as she was diagnosed with celiac and cut out, first of all, we understood what it was, and that, when you're celiac, your body starts attacking the villi, which are the parts of the intestine that absorb all the nutrients. So essentially, she was eating but not absorbing any of the goodness from the food. So of course you're under the weather, you've got no energy, you feel
That's
rubbish.
awful. Yeah.
Um, but then the speed at which all of this changed was amazing, and all down to the gut. So for example, personally, I've cut out drinking alcohol because of lots of health benefits for it. I know lots of people enjoy it, but that again is supposed to be terrible for the gut. It just
Yeah.
destroys all your microbiome that's in there. And again, the kind of the level of focus and energy that I've had from cutting out alcohol is fantastic. And I think a lot of that is is what's going on in your gut.
And what's going in some of the food and the alcohol.
Yeah,
The only thing I now drink, I'll have it's a good bottle of red wine, a nice Pinot Noir because it's got the least sugar. Because sugar is another thing that can really upset the stomach. I had a lot of
yeah,
problems with that. I stopped eating. The only fruit I ate was berries. They've got the least natural sugars, and tequila, strangely, is the purest form of alcohol. And I just have it with water and a slice of lime. And
well,
if I'm out, that's a really smooth one. A good tequila with water
yeah.
is that
Okay,
it.
well, I
Fizzy
will
drinks as
remember
well.
that.
So the tonic's out because it said gin and vodka, which I like gin, but with a tonic. So stop drinking fizzy drinks. So just on occasion, a
Yeah.
nice tequila with water and a slice of lemon is quite nice.
All right. Well, if I do decide to I think go and have a drink, that's going to be top of my list. Then that sounds lovely.
I stopped eating bread for God a number of years, and then when again during lockdown we made our own sourdough bread, and we have two bakers in Portobello. We just live in a little town in Portobello, um, and sourdough bread is the only bread that I can eat. And if not from the supermarkets because they also add more things into it, but if there's a local baker and that makes sourdough bread daily, I haven't had any problem with it, and it's maybe worth. Maybe there's something else in it that she can't have with being celiac.
Yeah.
But
So celiac is wheat. So wheat. So wheat is it's like the body has an autoimmune reaction to wheat. So rather than a kind of intolerance, it is a kind of if you have wheat, like the body thinks it's being attacked, so it starts attacking itself. Um, but
the
that's great to
sourdough,
know.
if I'm correct, doesn't have wheat in it.
I think.
Maybe,
Well, I
maybe
think you can
sourdough.
get.
Maybe
I thought it. Well, I guess it depends a little bit on the flour that's used.
yeah,
So if it uses a gluten-free flour,
yeah,
um, or a non-wheat based flour, I think it would be okay. But I think I think you make a really good point because we've had other people highlight that too. People who have an intolerance to gluten, so where their eating bread just doesn't work for them and makes them feel uncomfortable and bloated, have said the same thing to us about sourdough. And I guess it's the fermentation,
yeah.
isn't it? That's the thing. Is so.
And the
But
month
we'll,
that they use, you know, because I mean that just goes on and on and on, doesn't it?
yeah,
called that they use in it on a, which
yeah,
is
it's a culture, isn't it? Right, and they keep their culture and they keep it going.
Yeah. I just couldn't believe once I started eating it, and I was just having it twice a week, and then I thought, my goodness, because I got so much pain, but I'd also been checked for celiac, but I was fine in that way. But so it's maybe checking that out if she's, because I know some gluten-free bread, it might be better now, but I tried that over the years as well, and it wasn't great.
It's awful. But also going back to processed, like gluten, I mean, there's no point in eating it because gluten-free bread is just basically fake stuff that's put together to look like bread. You may as well eat Play-Doh that looks like bread. You know, there's no nutritional value in it. It's just simply we can't eat this, so we're just going to fake it. And there are some things which are okay, like the pasta is actually quite good in terms of it doesn't use too many, you know, it can be pea based. You know, there are lots of ways that it can be. Rice flour is another one, maize. So it's not too bad, but the bread is the one thing where we just don't have, because it is just designed to replicate what bread looks like, but it's not as good. It doesn't taste very nice, and it's just full of junk. So absolutely avoid it like the plague. But thanks very much for the tip on sourdough, and we'll definitely have a look into it for sure.
Sorry, just picking up again on what you're saying about what gets put into food, that anyone that doesn't know as much about food or doesn't look into it, just think, oh, it's gluten-free, that'll be fine. Because my daughter, who was diagnosed with MS, is doing amazing, and she's had another baby, and she controlled it all through diet. She's now on medication. After 5 years, she would be advised to go on it, but she looks amazing, and it's the same thing. She's vegan with fish. There's other things that she doesn't eat. She follows this diet. She researched and found someone in America, a doctor in America, and she's amazing. And that the amount of vegan-free food that's out there is also just full of, you don't even know what it is, most of what's on in the ingredients. But just eating food in its natural state, that's the best way, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And well done to your daughter. Like, that's amazing. She's managed to do that. And actually, I'm going to give a I can't remember, a shameless or shameful plug here, because there's a company and I buy some supplements from them. And the guy who set it up because his daughter had early onset MS, and he was really going in for how can I use diet to improve my daughter's health. So they're called New Zest. So I've got some here that I use every day. But you should get your daughter.
I have that as a smoothie every morning. It's a vanilla one, so it's
the guy who set it up, I met him, Trevor, was just a really great, no nonsense Aussie, and he's like, it's all about your diet, Will. But he's like, all you need, some good protein, cod liver oil, a bit of this, and you're good to go.
Protein one,
well, I'm glad that you like it too.
It's great. Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. Well, really nice chatting, and it's been great chatting on the diet as well, because that's a subject I find fascinating. So it's good. And thanks again for your time, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dawn. Talk to you soon. Bye.